The journey is conversations with ordinary people about stories of transformation and how we may have had setbacks in our life and how we persevered through those, how we've learned from those obstacles, and how they've maybe helped us on our path today. Well, Tonya, welcome to the journey, and let me share a little bit about what the journey is about. The journey is an opportunity using this particular platform to have conversations with just ordinary individuals who may have, for different reasons, have had setbacks in their life, may have had some perception of failure in their life, in their process of learning through that, in the process of that obstacle being there. How do they recreate themselves? How did they change who they were to who they are today as a result of those obstacles? We talk about those obstacles are part of our journey, and how do we change for the better because the obstacle was there. And so that's really what the journey is about, and just having ordinary conversations with individuals about their experience. And so welcome.
Thank you.
And so before we get into that, tell us a little bit about what do you do, and then also what do you do for fun? So start with the fun. What do you do for fun right now?
Well, right now, what I do for fun, this morning I was on the treadmill, ran 4 miles.
Okay.
That's really how I start my day now.
Okay.
In the past, 5-6 years ago, I didn't run at all. Okay. So that's what I do for fun, mainly for myself. But then with the family, hang out by the pool, go out to dinner. Our daughter loves to bake, so we'll bake together and things like that. Anything together.
Okay. So your alone time, even though there may be other people around, when you get to exercise, specifically running,
right.
And then variety of different activities with your your nuclear family.
Right,
Gotcha.
right. And I run on the path trails as much as I can with our dog, one of our dogs, yes.
Okay, great. Yes. So, and then what do you do? You work outside the home. So what do you do for an occupation? What do you do for
I'm actually an executive assistant at a chemical company.
Oh, okay.
So that's what I do right now.
Okay, gotcha. Okay. Now you've had, so how long have you been at this particular company?
About a year.
About a year, okay.
Yeah.
Okay,
yeah.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
All right. So now you're from this area, right?
Yes.
And you graduated from what high school?
Harlem.
Harlem, okay.
Yes.
And so that's where I graduated, and I think I was a little bit before you.
Not much, but yeah. Yes, I remember. Yeah.
So so tell us a little bit about your family of origin. Do you have a brother,
right.
Tommy, and then who? Any other siblings?
We have a sister that's in between us. So there was myself, and then 3 years later is our sister, and then Tommy is 3 years after her. It's like every 3 years.
Okay, so you guys were 6 years apart. You and Tommy were 6 years apart, and then your sister was right in the middle.
Right in the middle.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So tell us a little bit of growing up. What was it like growing up? What was as you look back on that, and that's kind of when we ask the idea of our perception of looking back, and what was our perception of ourselves then, or what was that view or the lens that we saw the world when we were younger? So
sure. So when I was younger, I had an aunt and uncle on my dad's side that were 9 and 16 when I was born. Okay. So being the first grandchild, they were pretty jealous.
Okay.
On the other side of the family, I had an uncle who was 10 at the time, and he was just the opposite.
Okay.
Kind of, spoiled me, I guess you could say. And then growing up, anytime we were together, the two that were the jealous ones, I remember going down to the Rock River to pick up the little clams,
Oh, sure.
and make ashtrays out of them, with the little pebbles. And I remember them hitting me over the head with a croquet mallet. I remember swimming in my grandparents' pool and having the little floaty thing on, and my aunt unplugging that, and my dad having to jump in and save me. So my perception of when I was younger was that I wasn't wanted around.
Okay.
I remember when I was about 14 working for my dad, because I worked for him installing carpet and tile and vinyl from the age of 7, literally.
Okay.
It was the summer before second grade that I started working for him, going picking up pieces. So anything I could do with my dad, I did.
Okay.
But I remember being at the store, at our family store, and my grandfather, my dad's dad, being there and telling me that I was worthless because I was a girl, that I was stupid, that I couldn't add, subtract, multiply, or divide. And I was just devastated, just devastated. And I think that came up because my dad owned the business now, and he had let the aunt that didn't like me or didn't want me around, so I thought, go, because she wasn't working out. So I think he was upset by that. I did tell my dad, and he said, so what are you going to do about it? And I said, prove him wrong. He said, okay. And I do know my dad talked to my grandpa. I don't know what was said, but my dad was a man of his word. If he said he would take care of it, it got taken care of. So, and that was the last we spoke of it. Okay. So it's just those things that come up, that I just wasn't good enough. I wasn't skinny enough. I wasn't pretty enough. I wasn't smart enough. I didn't get good grades in school at all until I went to college. I was the tomboy. I worked out with the wrestling team, you know, and I'm actually lighter now in weight than I was in high school by about 7 pounds. But then after high school is when I gained. Yeah.
Gained weight. So I want to go back to when this, because your aunt and uncle, though they were more like older cousins,
right? Really,
but your aunt and uncle, they were, I think you said 9 and 16 when you were born. Okay, so when you remember the mistreatment, you know, the bullying, whatever words you want to use to describe it, how old do you think you were, just guessing wise?
Well, I know that I would have been at least 6, because I remember my brother being around, and I was 6 when he was born.
Right.
So 7, 8, somewhere in there.
Okay. So because we talk about, we have this time period developmentally, that when we have certain events that happen to us in these developmental years, there's an emotional impression that happens. And even though there may be some cognitively, we may be able to, you know, put in perspective, you know, excuse it away or whatever. There's this emotional, at a core emotional, that they become defining moments or defining impressions. And when something that reminds us of that later on in life come up, we may go back to that thing, right? And you talked about not that those things that stand out in your mind had a message. It wasn't just the event. The message was translated as, I'm not of value, I'm not worth it, I'm not good enough. And then even with Grandpa being what he said, there was some very specific things that it was then highlighted, right? And so that's why I think, and I don't know if people always understand why does something carry forward, and I think it's because of that emotional impression that happens when these events become highlighted, right? Because there was a lot of events that happened when you were growing up, but there are certain ones like these 3 or 4 that you just mentioned, they end up getting highlighted, and then they somehow become a bigger story,
right? Because then that lets you believe, whether it's true or not, you start to believe that you aren't good enough, that you aren't of any value, that you are, you know, the ugly duckling, or, you know, you're not the one that wants to wear the dresses. You're always in jeans and t-shirts and flannels, and that's why I wore what I wore today, because it says keep moving forward, and the dots represent past, present, and future. Nice. And that's something my brother always said. Always look at what is coming. You know, what can you be training for?
Sure. So, well, you talked about, you mentioned about wanting to spend as much time as possible with Dad, and so what So tell us what your dad's name was Tom,
Right.
and so what? Tell us about Tom. What was Tom like?
Well, he was on the police department, the fire department, the water rescue team, and then we owned our own business of floor covering.
Okay.
And then my grandfather offered him the family business, so then he stopped being a police officer because, I mean, that's a lot. But he was just a man of his word. If he said it was going to happen, it was going to happen. I remember when I was probably about 13, he took us to the Loves Park jail. It was in the basement at the time. And you got the chief of police and the sergeant and everything standing behind my dad. And he's like, go in there, take a look around. And the door just slams. And he's like, if you ever come in here, don't call me. They would have already talked to me. You're going to sit here and think about it. And you just knew. He's not bluffing, you know. That's what was going to happen.
Sure.
So,
and though I mean, obviously a big part of what he did was he was a teacher, right, for you, and he modeled certain things for you and taught certain things. And looking back on it, you described yourself. You were the oldest and a self-proclaimed tomboy, right? And so, what do you think was looking back now? What do you think is the reason why you wanted to spend so much time with Dad?
Just, you know, at the beginning I was like, why am I drawn to this physical work and not wanting to stay home? And everything was a teaching experience. Whether he's like, okay, watch me cut in this carpet, or how would you lay out this floor? If you're going to lay out the floor, the tile, where would you start at? You know, and every day you learn something new, and you were always doing something different. I mean, the day before you might have been ripping out a bathroom and redoing the bathroom, but now you're onto a kitchen, or it was just ever changing.
Okay.
And I asked him one time, I said, why are you so, what's the word I want to use? He just made sure I was learning something every day. And I'm like, why is this so important? He said, because when you have a house, you don't have to pay people to do it. And it's so true, you know, because now, you know, I know how to do that stuff.
Sure. So it was not only was it fun, right? Because you're constantly doing something, and then you got to be around your dad, but your dad interacted with you,
right?
And it was that interaction with him, and you weren't less than in his eyes.
No,
you were very much his helper.
Right. And it was more of a team. Like I just like working as a team. It's not about, you know, he'd be like, okay, you know, this is what we're going to do, but I'm going to do this part and you're going to do that part. Or we did a big church gymnasium, and we did all the field work, and then there was a lot of cutting in of the tile to do, and he just left me there all day, and all I did is cut in tile all the way around, and he trusted me to do that as a kid, you know, 18 years old.
Interesting.
So, but I did move out when I was 17. Right after I graduated high school, I moved out because working with him and living with him and us being so much alike, it didn't work out.
Okay.
So, yeah.
So leading up to that, to graduating from high school, what was high school like? What was social life? What was academic life? Were you involved with activities?
Well, I was bullied a lot up until middle school.
Okay.
I remember an incident happening, and I stood up for myself. There wasn't any physical altercation or anything like that, but I did stand up for myself verbally, and that changed everything for me.
Okay.
And so then in high school, I was the one, you know, Cassata, you want to go to the office? Okay, you know, I'll go to the office, not taking it seriously, because I figured I had my life planned out. I was going to work for my dad. I was going to marry my boyfriend, Sean, who is now my husband.
Okay.
We've been together since, January of '87.
Okay.
So a long time. Married 26 years. So we can get married if we had kids, and then I'd work in the office. I wouldn't be lifting the heavy rolls of carpet and all that kind of stuff, and then I'd go back to installing. So I have my life planned out for me. So I thought. So why take my studies seriously? Because, I got it under control.
Sure. Okay.
And I didn't.
Okay.
Life changes.
Yeah. So, well, let's talk about that. So you graduate from high school. You're 17 years old. You move out. Is Sean the same age as you?
Yes.
Same grade?
Same grade, yep.
Same grade, same age. And who'd you move in with? What?
My grandparents, my mom's parents, mom's parents had a house, and they had a bedroom and a bathroom upstairs, and it was like having my own little apartment.
Okay.
But yet still, I had Grandma and Grandpa there, to talk to, and then after the first big event in my life, I moved out of there, and honestly, I don't remember from that event happening in December till May when I moved with Sean after I graduated college.
Okay.
It was just, it's gone.
Yeah. Okay.
I don't remember where I worked, where I lived, anything.
Okay. So you went there. So what happened in December? What was the big event?
December of 91, our dad, I was supposed to be with him. So there's a lot of guilt there. He went to go measure a job to do, and at the last second he said, your mom's going to go to the grocery store, I'm going to go measure this job for us. Okay, fine. He goes to measure the job, and I don't know, do you remember Zips? It was a fast food place on North 2nd.
Oh, yeah.
He was supposed to go there to get us burgers, and so I paged him at the time, and I said, Tom, please call the office. And he wasn't calling. And I look at the clock, and I remember it getting warm. Big snowflakes out the front window. It was December 20th. And then it got cold and dark, and I felt sick. And an hour later, Father Wintick from the Rockford Police, I believe, walked in, and he said, are you, Margaret? And I said, no, I'm their daughter, Tonya. He said, my dad died in a car accident, didn't he? And he said, yes, he did. Because I had had dreams that somebody passed in a blue vehicle, and at the time my dad and Sean drove blue vehicles. So then that's when, your world crumbles, Okay. So in one day I lose my dad and my job.
Right, okay. It was a car accident?
Yes, head-on car crash with a semi.
Oh, okay. So did they ever find out any details, or maybe it doesn't really matter? But
well, they did. It was just an accident. Yeah. He was coming into town on 173 where the train trestle used to be. Remember, you used to have to go under the train trestle and come back? Yeah. He slid in front of the semi, and it was just an accident. So
it was kind of the weather related to what you were just talking about, where black ice had probably played a factor into it because of the change of temperature, change of weather. Okay.
He was actually crushed at the steering wheel. The semi driver stayed there, of course, and was with him the whole time. As soon as they got there to take him out of the car, and they put him, or out of the Suburban, and put him down on the gurney or whatever, he bled out. So they airlifted him to the hospital, and that's when Father Wintick, I don't know if he was at the accident or at the hospital, but that's when he became involved in it.
Okay. So this was, what year, 91 you said?
91.
91. And you graduated from high school in
88.
In 88.
So I was 21.
21, okay. And your dad was how old when he died?
44.
44. Wow, man, talk about young.
Right.
And so he'd been running the business, which was originally your grandfather's, and he'd been doing that full time. So he was retired as a police officer, and so that was where all his energy was going into this family-owned business.
Right.
But he was the owner-operator.
Right. Still on the volunteer fire, still on the volunteer water rescue team. But yes, all of his energy was going into the business.
Gotcha. Okay. And so when you said that the business, when your dad dies, one of your closest companions, one of your closest friends, but he was your boss.
Right.
And so, tell me from what you do remember of that time period, what was, everything's going this way, and then all of a sudden,
veers off.
yeah.
I remember a lot of people coming over to the house. That's before Facebook and all that stuff. But I remember just the house being full of a lot of people. And he had one really good friend on the Rockford Police Department that took me aside and said, this is going to be hard for you because you guys were made from the same cloth. And I didn't know what he meant at the time. There's lots of things going through my head.
Yeah.
But at the time, Tommy was 16. I had moved out when he was 11. So, I didn't have much to do with my brother and sister because I had already moved out and kind of done my own thing. And when you go back home and Dad just wants to talk about work, I'm like, oh, I need a break,
Yeah, sure.
So that was, and then I'm thinking, now what? I lost my dad, I lost my job. How am I going to pay for anything, even food?
Right.
And that's what then panic sets in.
Okay. And so what happened, from what you remember, what happened then as the dust settles from the funeral and people start going on with their lives, right? Obviously your life has now been halted.
Right.
It's been changed. And obviously your mom and your brother and sister too. And what happened next?
Well, I did odd jobs. I had an uncle that had a construction business, and I did odd jobs for money, and then tile work and things like that. And then Sean graduated college that May of 92 and had a job with a company up in Wisconsin.
Okay, so 6 months later.
6 months later, I move, and it was like, okay, I could just tell myself, Dad's measuring a job, Dad's out doing this or doing that. So when we moved back years later, it was like, okay, now that reality set in. He's not, my brain, was teasing before and saying, well, he was just busy doing this, that's why I didn't talk to him,
It's kind of like a denial.
Right.
So how long were you guys up in Wisconsin, you and Sean?
Well, we had moved away in 92, and then with his job and stuff, we moved 7 times in 9 years.
Oh my gosh.
And moved back here in 99, but Peyton was born in 96.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, got married in 93, and Peyton was born in 96 and moved back here in 99.
Okay, all right. And so there's this big hole, right? Because of what happens with Dad, everything's changing. But at the same time, everything's changing within a very short time period. The opportunity then allowed, not because of your dad's death, but maybe allowed you and Sean then to move to where his job was, because I imagine that would have been a little bit of a dilemma.
Right.
If the business was still running, you were still working for Dad, then it would have been, which path you're going to choose.
Exactly.
But that wasn't an option at that point.
No.
And I'm assuming the business just closed.
Right. It was closed at that time. It was just too hard to keep open and stuff like that. But moved up to Stevens Point, Wisconsin.
Oh, that's a distance.
That's a distance. Sean worked for a company there, but he traveled. He was gone. He was home an average of 3 months a year.
Oh.
And that was before we had all this electronics that we could talk and everything. So I move up there not knowing anybody, not having a job, and having to figure it out.
Okay.
So it was a hard time. It was a dark time.
Tell us a little bit about that part of me, because now it's real isolation. And what was that like?
Well, thank goodness it was in the summer, because then I could get outside, and there was a water park that you didn't have to pay to go into the pool areas. Or I'm sorry, you didn't have to pay to go into the lounge areas, but you had to pay which pool you wanted to go to. So I would go out and look for jobs, and after a while it's like, okay, I need a break. So I went into the free area and laid out, and then I'd go to their showers and take a shower and then come back, so I didn't spend any money. And then I would go back to our apartment. So at least I could get out and see people. And then I did find a job and made friends and ended up hanging out with people Sean worked with, their spouses. So doing that, Okay,
all right. So loneliness, I'm guessing some self-doubt. During that time period, you're with who you want to be with,
right?
But physically, he's not there because of the requirements of his job,
right?
So and then you come back to Rockford in '99, and you guys are starting to create a life here. Tell us a little bit about.
Yeah, well, we come back in 99. Peyton at that time is, well, she was born in 96, so she was 2.5 when we moved back. We rented a place for a little while. Of course, we stayed with Sean's parents for about a month or so until we could find a place to rent. And then we ended up buying our house that we're in now, 19 years later, that April of 2000.
Okay.
So we come back and, life is just, busy. You got a little 3-year-old running around, and I started working at UPS at night and then worked there in management for 9 years. So that kept us busy. But all at the same time, I didn't have the connection with my family because I had moved away. Tommy started his journey, and his life and everything. We were really close when we were younger.
You and Tommy?
Yes.
Yeah, tell us a little bit about that.
Well,
you're 6 years apart.
We're 6 years apart, but we're the closest of, And he was just goofy, just goofy. I remember when I brought Sean home to meet everybody the first time, he was just acting a fool. And, here he is young. Well, because when we started dating, he would have been 10. Because we started dating when I was 16.
Okay.
So this is how I'm going to act when he walks in the door, and just acting a fool. So he came in and introduced Sean to my parents, and so then we went out to the Belford outdoor.
Oh yes, yeah. I remember that.
yeah, a long time ago.
Yeah.
So
you guys were close. I mean, obviously there's an age difference, and then that's going to obviously play a part in the different activities that you can do together. I mean,
right.
You're in high school. He's in finishing up grade school type of thing.
Right.
And so when you come back in '99, you're how old at that time?
I was 29.
29. Okay. So then Tom is 23-ish. Okay.
Right.
And now you have just one?
Just one.
Just one. Okay. And so you guys are doing life here, and I know when you and I first started talking, or part of when I first started talking was that you and Tommy were working out together.
Yes.
And I know Tommy was involved with sports when he was in high school, specifically wrestling.
Right.
And then later got into weightlifting,
right.
and was real big into powerlifting. And
yes.
And I have an interesting story with how he and I actually got to really know each other. We were going to a wrestling tournament. My brother-in-law and I would go to wrestling tournaments, either NCAA national championship or the Big Tens, or we would go to the state wrestling tournament, and we would bring people with us. Sometimes it was just two of us, but we would typically bring other individuals, and that was one of the times when Grant Tickner went with us, and Tommy went with us, and we ended up spending we were driving to Champaign, so we spent 3 hours the whole time talking,
right.
on the way down. And we obviously had a lot in similar interests and similar things in common with him powerlifting and me bodybuilding. But tell us a little bit about working out with him and the fitness aspect of it as he was then involved with that. He also then took over the business or opened up his own business. Not taking over the business, but opened up his own, mostly tiling, right?
Right.
But he did
custom tile work.
So he didn't do all types of floor covering. I mean, he probably could, but it's mostly tile.
Well, he didn't care to do carpet, but tile and laminates and things like that, hardwood stuff like that. He did. Yeah.
Gotcha.
But we hadn't. We kind of drifted apart after Dad passed away. We all had. What people don't understand is that I think in grief in general is that we might have the same person that passed away, but he was different to each of us, And Tommy was, 15 when our dad passed? So he was at a crucial time in his development, and I hadn't lived at home since he was 11, so I didn't have much interaction with him on a daily basis from that on. And when we moved back, family dynamics with my side of the family weren't great, so we didn't hang out a lot. And when we did, I would physically get sick, and it just wasn't a good situation. But what I did, now looking back, I can see this. When my dad passed, I used food as my comfort.
Okay.
I'm sad. Oh, but those French fries will make me feel better.
Okay.
Or, things like that. Not alcohol, not anything like that, but just the sugary cookies, candy. I mean, that's really my downfall. Donuts. I mean, yeah.
Okay.
So that's where I went. And one morning at peak, I'm walking, and this guy runs into me, and I'm like, what the heck? I turn around, it's my brother. And from that moment on, it's like there was no time in between when we were little and now. It's like we just connected, and we would talk on the phone for hours. I would go in my bedroom and shut the door, and we'd just talk and talk. And Sean's like, who are you talking to? I'm like, Tommy. Just about everything. From, I want to do this job in the kitchen, because he'd put in our kitchen floor. Or, how do I deal with this with Peyton? What are some good ideas, or just some different things.
Sure.
So we'd just talk.
Okay.
So then we got into Peak has their indoor triathlon. He's like, you should do that. And I'm like, oh, God. Because I was on the swim team, worked out with the wrestling team in high school, stuff like that. And I just don't like to swim anymore. I'm just not that. And he's like, you should always keep moving forward. And you always have to have something to train for, something to do, keep your mind busy. I'm like, okay, fine, whatever. So I did this indoor triathlon, and I remember him by the pool just screaming at me. Just like a coach, like walking up and down, And then you go to the treadmill and then the bike, or vice versa. And that's the last picture I have together of us, is that January of 2013, the Peak Indoor Triathlon is us together. And I was 200 pounds.
Okay.
And just to finish it was an accomplishment.
Oh, I bet.
Just to be able to. And what I like about their indoor is that everybody's running together and everybody's biking together, and it's not like you're feeling like, everybody's way up there, why am I even trying?
Right.
We're all right here together.
Right.
So it was very encouraging how they do it.
Sure. So prior to that event, right, had you ever done anything, you were on the swim team, so obviously you had competed then, but had you ever done any post-high school, any kind of like 5K, any kind of nothing like that?
Nothing like that.
So this was a big step.
It was a very big step,
It's a big step, okay.
And so then after that, we just, from that time, that was January, so we had trained prior to that. He was training with me and helping me. He wasn't getting in the pool, but he was, encouraging me to get on the bike and running and stuff like that. And my running wasn't running. It was a swift walk.
Yeah.
It wasn't a jog or anything, but it was just to keep moving forward.
Yeah. Okay. And so this is in January of 13, and so you are. Where are you working at that time? Do you remember?
I don't even remember. Might have been UPS.
Oh, UPS
yeah,
still? Okay.
Maybe.
So,
I don't honestly remember.
Okay, so working at UPS, and I think you guys trained in the morning, right? Because that's when I would see
you.
Guys.
It wasn't. I'm sorry. I think I was at Danfoss, where Sean's at doing. Yeah, it was.
Okay, and I think I saw you guys in the morning.
Yeah.
Working out early in the morning when I was
early,
there.
yes.
And I think that was the year 13 was we went either, that must have been either February or March.
Okay.
We went to the wrestling meet together.
Yeah.
He joined us for the wrestling meet.
Right.
And so you guys were still working out even after the event, still working out together and things like that. And then May came.
And then May came. Well, just to back up a few months, Sean's mom got diagnosed with cancer in February of 12.
Okay, so the year
just
before.
the year prior.
Okay.
She unfortunately passed in September of 12.
Okay.
From stomach and liver cancer. And then we get a dog, a rescue, 6 weeks to the day later. and we rescued her. They had the same birthday. Layla and Sue have the same birthday.
Okay.
So, of course, we get Layla. Oh, now her name is Layla Sue.
Okay.
So we lost his mom in September, and then we put our dog Boomer down in December. He was old, just one of those things. But then in April, Sean's grandma passed of old age. She was in her 90s.
Okay.
Then we come home, which is right around Sean's mom and Layla's birthday, and Layla collapses. We had to take her to the emergency vet. She had a blood disorder.
Oh, jeez.
We had to put her down. Then in May, my grandma passed away.
This is your mom's mom?
Yes.
Okay. So the ones that you stayed with for a brief time period. Okay.
Yeah. She passed away in May. Then May came and Tommy passed from suicide.
Okay.
Yeah.
Wow. A ton of losses there.
A ton of losses. Yeah. And then that November, a friend of ours, Matt, passed from suicide. And the next July, my Uncle Mike, who was the uncle that was 10 years older than me, but treated me like, here she is, let's go play, he passed from suicide. Okay. So we had a lot going on in that short period of time.
So a lot of losses. Some of them were older age related.
Right.
With your dog, with grandparents.
Right.
So some of those, it's still a loss and it's still sad. And
right.
But it almost like we can see it, or even like with cancer, it doesn't happen overnight. I mean, there's a building up, there's a preparation.
Right.
You start trying to prepare yourself for it. It doesn't take away the loss, but at least there's mentally you can see it coming, right?
Right.
And somehow prepare yourself for that.
Unlike a car accident or a suicide. Yeah.
So tell me a little bit about the suicide, because I remember that I remember how I found out, and it was Dan Carlson who had contacted me, who called me.
Okay.
And now if I think back, I think Dan was also one of the individuals that was with us that weekend when we all went to the wrestling tournament.
Okay.
I know Dan and Tommy worked together. What was that like? What was going through that whole experience? And
well, that morning I wasn't. I was at work. I believe it was a Thursday. Sean was off work, and you get your breaks during the day, and you're not thinking of anything. And I text Sean and I said, I'm just not feeling good. Something's going on. He's like, oh, you're fine. I'm like, yeah, probably. And that was a little bit before 9 in the morning because we started work early. And then at 9 o'clock break, I text Sean. I said, no, something's going on. I feel sick. Everything just is annoying me. Like I don't know, everything was just on high alert. And he's just like, well, just get through the day. I'm like, okay, well, I'm crying. I don't know why, but I'm just sad and everything's annoying me. Somebody not picking up their feet or, stuff like that. And then I get done with work at like 2:30, 3 o'clock, and I check my phone, and it was Tommy's wife, and she said to call. And so I call her, and she tells me that Tommy passed away. And I remember falling to the ground at work and calling Sean right away. Because Tommy was like the little brother he never had because he was the youngest of 3. So that's where that's at. And I called Sean immediately. And we head over to their house. And, of course, by the time we get there, it's full of people and police and everything. And it was just surreal. I had to sit down and just take it in and know that he was in the basement,
over the last 3.5 years or so, I've spent a lot of time trying to understand suicide, and so this would have been when Tommy died was a couple years before that piece, but his death was another one of those suicides, and obviously there was 2 more that happened pretty quickly after that, and we'll talk about that in a second. But one of the things that the research shows that was it 4 out of 5 times, something like that, that clear signs of someone being in that darkness are evident. And though probably that's true, there's probably some truth to that from an intellectual standpoint, I just am not confident that when we're going through it, when we're living life with someone, that we can see the signs so clearly if we haven't been educated or trained and we practice looking for the signs.
Exactly.
We can see them afterwards.
Oh, right, yeah.
It always seems to be much clearer afterwards, but when it's going on, we have a tendency just to rationalize them away or overlook them or whatever. And when you think back to that time period, of course, I know you probably thought about it
a lot,
hundreds of thousands of times.
Right.
What indicators, what signs, what thoughts regarding what was going on with him?
I remember being at peak, and there were times that we didn't work out. And we'd just sit at those tables and talk. And I would think afterwards, we didn't work out at all. But then I actually remember thinking, but I got to talk to my brother for an hour, And I remember one time he was really mad about something. Like when he was a kid, he'd get really mad. And he was super skinny as a kid. Like he was the one that got picked on. And then to be a bodybuilder, But I remember being in one of their back hallways where the stairs, and he was pacing. And he's just talking and yelling, and I'm just like, what's going on? I look back at that going, I wonder if that was an indicator as to, like, his mind was just going all these different places, His business was really good. He had, everything that I knew of was good. But I think a lot of it goes back to our dad's death. Whether it did or not, I don't know. We'll never know. But I think a lot of it, he was 15 years old. Back then, you didn't have the counseling and everything being so, hey, I remember after Tommy passed, I had someone come to me, and said, you need to see someone, because you knew I was in a dark place. And I don't care who it is, I don't care if you come to me or go to a different group of counselors, but see someone. And we didn't have that when our dad passed, and I think that would have helped him. Here he is, now with just girls, doesn't have that father figure at home. I think that would have helped him a lot.
Sure, yeah. Well, and probably especially, like you said, that it's sometimes what doesn't happen, right? Right. When someone leaves us and someone dies, it's what doesn't. It's there's a void there, right? The opportunities that your dad, not only in your life, would have been able to share and model and teach you, but continue teaching you, but things that maybe Tommy didn't get an opportunity because of his age, and you were there. I mean, with him, with Dad, right. And so there wasn't maybe the same opportunities. Right. There would have been, but there wasn't necessarily at the same time. But and then you end up having 2 more losses by suicide. So had you known anybody who had died from suicide prior to your brother?
My aunt, now looking back, the aunt and uncle that would, push me away, so I thought that's what their intentions were. What they were, I don't know. But in 2001, my uncle passed of a prescription overdose. And then in 2006, that aunt that had passed of a prescription overdose. But looking back, I know he was very isolated, very sick with diabetes and other health issues. I know that she was in contact with one of our cousins saying that she wanted to, not be here anymore. Okay. And this is something I just learned literally this past June. Oh, okay. So now I'm thinking, okay, now were those accidental or were those deliberate or, what is that? Okay. So, but at the time of Tommy's passing, no, I didn't. Was not cognizant of that. No. And then what did you say? So Tommy died in May, and then there was someone else who died in July? Our friend Matt passed in November, and then the next July, my Uncle Mike. Okay. All right. So it was all from suicide. All from suicide.
So now you're thrust into this world where people have now died from a combination of different things, but some type of depressive situation, but their life was taken by suicide. I remember, afterwards that you didn't want this to be for nothing.
Right.
That there was a big push from an element of everything from the training and continue working out, as well as you want to be involved and do things. So tell us a little bit about that part of the journey, and then what's it been like the last 6 years?
Right. Well, after he passed, I started eating better. I lost some weight. I ended up gaining some of that back this last winter, and then lost the last 27 in May.
Okay.
May to July I lost. So I'm down, 50 pounds now.
Okay. All right.
So, but I started, I've spoken at schools. I spoke with you at Boylan, I think it was.
Yep.
I've spoken at Auburn. I really like doing that. I like the younger kids because that's who we need to educate.
Right.
And
when you're going to do these talks, you're primarily talking about, well, what are some of the topics that you're talking about?
Well, not judging a book by its cover.
Okay.
I ask them to guess my age and their opinion of me, what they think of me, what kind of music I listen to, and then I tell my journey and my story, and they're like, "Oh my gosh, that's so not where we were at the beginning. That's not what we would have thought. That you've been through all this trauma." But I use working out. I didn't start running until it was 5 years ago, somewhere around this month,
Okay.
that I started actually running. I lost weight from eating better, eating healthier, eating more often, not just one big meal a day, but like 6,
Sure.
And that's what I've gone back to this last May, because I went to a doctor and they're thinking I have some challenges with my heart.
Oh, okay.
So when my dad did pass, his heart fell apart on the table when they did the autopsy. So I'm going through some testing for that, and but I figured the more physical I am, and they suggested losing more weight would help with my heart.
Okay.
But I just kind of put myself I got a treadmill this last Mother's Day, so I'm running more often. Instead of just 2 or 3 days a week, I run 5 to 6 days a week.
Okay.
But anytime I can get out on the trails, that's what I do.
Sure.
I've done the first 5K I didn't even finish. And everybody, they look at you now and go, "Oh, well, you can run, and you've done half marathons and Tough Mudder and Ragnar's, and I'm never going to be to that." Yes, you are.
Yeah.
We all started somewhere.
Right.
I mean, we didn't come out of the womb running a half marathon.
Right.
So that's my saving grace, is to get out there and run and do all that kind of stuff.
So when you think back, as we were saying earlier about as you reflect back to when you were in grade school during those emotional, vulnerable times, and then you think about, after Dad dies, and then later a series of deaths, losses, not only with your pets, with the family members, and then a series of deaths by suicide. When you think about those, looking at Tonya from where you're at now, and you think about how would you describe her how she thought? What was her perception of the world? How was her perception of herself when you think back to that time period?
Well, when I think back, right after Tommy passed, I remember laying in the hallway of our house, and I'm on the carpet, and I'm hitting the walls, and Sean and Peyton get me to the bed. And at that time, Layla had just passed, and we got a new puppy. Storm is who I run with. And Sean took a picture. I have it. I look at it almost every morning, and I look like I'm dead. And the puppy just came around and went over my head and hugged me. And I look back and I think, I could have been down the same path as Tommy. And I've been close. But then I think, how can we teach others and not have the same thing keep repeating itself? Because we need to keep moving forward. We keep, level up and, always want to do more.
Yeah.
So
So back then, there was time periods in the midst of that loss and the grieving process. Utilized exercise, utilized continued weight loss. I think, if I remember correctly, I think you had shirts that was Team Tommy. I remember those shirts. And now there is this desire to be able to, either through exercise or in other ways, to be able to give back when you have the opportunity.
Exactly.
And so if you look at yourself today, what would you say is how you view yourself today? I mean, you've competed in Tough Mudders, right? And so that is more than just running. And what was challenging about the Tough Mudders, and what did you learn from that?
The very first obstacle on the Tough Mudder was a 6-foot wall, and I fell off of it and tore my shoulder. So, but I competed it. Some of the things I couldn't do because I couldn't pull myself up. But I would do something else, and I kept running. The best thing about that is that it wasn't timed for me. It was just being able to say I did it.
Right.
And that I went all out. In between the obstacles, we ran to each obstacle.
Okay.
And then the Ragnar trail, it runs throughout the night. Okay. And you run trails by yourself. Okay. And it's a relay, and you're on a team. But the toughest part about that was at night. And I'm thinking, running at night by myself with just this little headlamp on and watching the people bob up and down. And I didn't know what it was going to be, but I embraced it to move forward. And, the whole time I've got, Tommy in my ear, my dad in my ear, and, just to, again, keep moving forward. And to, what can I learn from this? And one person, I was, on Facebook, and it's like, what do you think of when you think of me? And one person said perseverance. And it's like, wow, for other people to think of me like that. But yet, me not feel that about myself. We have to be able to see that in ourselves.
Right. And by competing in the Ragnar, by competing in the Tough Mudder, is it starting to come?
Yeah.
Starting to come?
Yeah.
Perceiving yourself as someone who is who has this resiliency now, who has this perseverance now, because you've had a lot of obstacles.
Right.
And some of them had huge emotional impacts. Some of them were shocking. But you continue, as you said, moving forward.
Right.
And continue trying to learn about yourself and learn of how you can give back.
Right.
So as we are looking at kind of wrapping up for this episode, if you were going to share anything to anybody listening, either one, maybe having struggled with being bullied, or maybe struggling with body image, or someone who may have struggled with some depression, and they could be in that dark place. What would you want to share with somebody?
Well, I think mainly the body image and the depression. When using food as your reward or your comfort, you can do anything you want to do. You can become anything you want to become, and it's not too late. I'm 49, and I just keep, well, this one sounds fun, I'll do this one. But I like to run by myself. I don't like to run in big groups of people. Okay. I don't mind doing virtuals and then go run my own pace, But just to believe in yourself and to know we've all been there. I mean, this is a picture of me when I was 21.
Oh, wow.
So
this was before your dad died or after your dad died?
After. This was our engagement photo.
Okay.
So this was just, I was pretty fit, when my dad passed, because I'm working out, doing a physical job. This was actually just 6 months later. Okay. Yeah, it was in the fall that year, and that was our engagement picture.
Okay. Wow. Yeah, it's hard to
see, huh?
Yeah.
Hard to see where it's me.
Yeah. No, it almost doesn't look like you,
right?
At all. But, and I think it's interesting. Your substance of choice was food.
Yes.
And there's a social acceptance that food is, is more socially accepted than opioids, or in some families' systems than alcohol, right? And so, but it can have the same detriments of keeping people stuck and messing with perception of who they are and how they interact in the world. And so I appreciate you being able to share your story with that. I know that just because you've made progress doesn't mean that you don't have difficult days. It's called life, and that we do, but you've now had some experience of how to pick yourself up and just keep moving forward.
Exactly.
There is not, I think, the metaphor of running, you're doing a Tough Mudder or Ragnar, is that you're not going to get to whatever that milepost is or that finish line if you stop.
Right.
You just got to keep moving forward.
Right. And that's what's great about running, is that if you're out on the trail and you're on the treadmill at the gym or whatever, well, you can just step right off. But you're out on trail, you got to figure out how to get back.
Yeah.
So that's part of the adventure too.
A little bit more kind of like how life is, right?
Exactly. Got to get back.
Yeah. So Tonya, thank you very much for being here. Thanks for sharing not only your own story of dealing with even if they did say it was teasing, but that teasing may be taken in as bullying, maybe taking in as maybe they know something I don't know, and that can have a lasting impression. And then obviously when there's a major loss, like your dad dying suddenly from a car accident and your brother dying from suicide, why it's so important to be able to talk to someone, because what we're thinking may not necessarily be truth. And so to be able to talk with someone, to be able to have that reframed and be able to look at it and question a little bit more about where'd this come from and why am I thinking this way.
Exactly.
Well, thank you for being here today, and thank you for sharing. So,
yes, thanks.
Thank you very much for being with us today as Tonya was sharing not only how some of the setbacks that she's had in her life through body image, but through some significant losses in her life, but how she's utilized fitness and this desire to be able to give back to others so that they don't have to succumb to that darkness and that negative thinking. Thank you for joining us today, and I look forward to seeing you again next week.